please welcome to the stage Pastor and Representative Dan Fisher.
Are you as tired as I am of being told by Washington bureaucrats what we can and can't do in Oklahoma? Are you tired of 9 egotistical, God-hating judges in black robes calling themselves the Supreme Court, defining for us what is right and what is wrong? Are you sick of that? It's going to take more of this than to stop it. Unlike Mrs. Lutz, who I appreciated so much, I can guarantee you that practically everything that I will say will be politically incorrect. So I just want to warn you right now. It is my privilege to serve District 60 in the House of Representatives right here in this building. Now, friends, I want to ask you a question. How did we get to where we are? What is wrong? What has brought us to the place that we're having to speak out against the murder of unborn children? What has happened? What has brought us to the place that we're having to re-emphasize that marriage is a man and a woman, an institution designed by God? What got us here? Well, I believe we have failed in 2 ways. We have failed in our Christian responsibility, and we have failed in our civic responsibilities. And because we have failed, friends, we are in this mess. Now, if you've read the preamble to the U.S. Constitution lately, you know that it begins with these words: "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union." Notice 2 subjects are covered there. We, the people, the consent of the governed, and the fact that we are a union, not a nation. Now, when the founders put together what we call and what they called a union, they would have never envisioned surrendering the kind of state sovereignty that we are being asked to surrender today. In fact, they had just fought a war against a hyper-powerful, overreaching central government, and it is completely out of the question that they would have then surrendered that new, bought, and paid for liberty by surrendering it now to another overreaching central power of government. So this is not what the founders intended. My responsibility here for the next few moments is to remind you of who Oklahoma really is. Now, before the war between the states, it was commonly said the United States are, plural. It was not till after that war that the phrase changed to the United States is. Now, even though I'm happy that we ended slavery in this country, it was a horrible mark upon us and we should have dealt with it sooner. Friends, there is something that happened in the psyche of America that turned us from an are to an is. Our founders never envisioned one monolithic government ruling from Washington, D.C. that would tell every state what they could and could not do. How can you have a one-size-fits-all when you compare the mentality and the spiritual condition of, let's say, Massachusetts to the spiritual condition and mentality of, let's say, Oklahoma? Right. How could you have a definition of marriage or health care or anything else that would satisfy those 2 cultures? I would argue that you cannot. That's why the founders in the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, enumerated very limited powers that they would deal out to this new central government that they were founding. And then, to make doubly sure that everyone understood, in the 9th and the 10th Amendments, they reiterated that anything we did not spell out that is the responsibility of this new central, or what we call today federal government, those things are reserved to the who? To the states and to the people. In Federalist 45, James Madison said, "The powers that are delegated to this new central government are few and defined." Do you think Washington, D.C. sees its powers as few and defined? No, of course they do not. Then he went on to say, "And the powers that are still reserved to the states are numerous and indefinite." Do you think the Supreme Court of the United States believes that the powers of the state of Oklahoma are numerous and indefinite? No, of course they do not. So what has happened? Well, we have forgotten those valuable pieces of information. Something has happened over time that has allowed us to settle back into our apathy, trying to chase our jobs and our families and all the things that we need to do. And we did not keep watch over this behemoth that was growing in Washington, D.C. And now we are faced with a major problem. Now, short of God, and I certainly believe that God can do all things, there is only one way for us to turn this monster back and to put it back within its cage of its enumerated powers. And that's for we, the people, to say, we do not consent, we will not consent, and we will not stop, and we will not go quietly into the night. We are going to stand, and we're going to shout the truth from the rooftops if necessary. We are not going to give in. Now, because we've allowed things like the 17th Amendment that turned the Senate into the House of Lords, look at it. That's what the Senate is now. It's elected by popular vote rather than these state legislatures. It's now the House of Lords, exactly like England. Now the House of Representatives is the House of Commons. I serve in a House of Representatives, and believe you me, those senators believe that we are the House of the Commons. I can certainly assure you of that. So what we've done is we've circled back around to what Great Britain had that we fought to get away from. And now the president sees himself as a monarch. So we have a House of Lords, a House of Commons, and a monarch. On top of that, we have allowed the Supreme Court to invent things like the incorporation doctrine out of the 14th Amendment. There was nothing in the 14th Amendment that was saying that the states would now be under the federal government. It's the exact opposite. The founders would have never seen it that way. Had they, I can assure you many of them would have said no when it came to joining this union. Now let's bring it down to the most common principles here. This building behind me, notice what it says right there in the gable of that building. It says the state of Oklahoma. Oddly enough, there are 50 of those such buildings all over the country. Last summer I was speaking in Utah and their building just like this one. Why in the world do we have 50 capitals, state capitals, all over the country if Washington can trump anything we do here? Why do we have an Oklahoma state constitution? Why does Arkansas have an Arkansas state constitution and Utah and all the other states have state constitutions if the Supreme Court on a whim can just walk in and change our state constitutions? When over 80% of the people in a state vote to define marriage as one man, one woman, and then the Supreme Court can step up and say, oh no, we don't agree with that, and strike that part of our state constitution, I ask you, what other parts can they strike down? What about our gun laws? What about here in Oklahoma with concealed carry and open carry? Can the Supreme Court just walk in and say, well, we don't agree with that either, so you can't do that anymore? Friends, I submit to you that if this state capital is as meaningless as Washington says it is, rather than spending $120 million to renovate it, which I voted against, by the way, it should have been your choice, not these guys in this building. Instead of spending $120 million to renovate it, let's sell it. It'd make a great museum. Let's take the Oklahoma State Constitution and shred it. We don't need it anyway, because they'll throw out whatever parts they don't like anyhow. In fact, why don't we lay all of us legislators off? I have a lot of good friends here. We'll just lay all of us off. You could save millions of dollars by doing that and a whole lot of headache. You could take care of your state judiciary. Just get rid of it, because the federal judges believe they decide everything anyhow. So why do we need the state judiciary? What I'm saying is, there is a reason why we have state borders. There's a reason why we have state governors and state judiciaries and state capitals and legislatures, because states are sovereign entities who are a part of a union by choice, not by force. So, to wrap up my little piece of time here, what are we going to do? Well, I'm calling upon like-minded states. In fact, I just visited with Mr. David Brumbaugh, one of our representatives. He happens to be the chairman of our Republican caucus in the House. He already has 38 signatures of representatives. He ought to have 100 already, but he has 38 signatures calling for state compacts. I am asking like-minded states and our citizens, states like Texas and Louisiana and Utah, where I was, where those representatives looked at me and said, Dan, we're waiting on Oklahoma. Do something. I'm calling upon like-minded states to begin to stand up and just say a two-letter word. It's not hard to say. No! No! It's easy to say. Now somebody says, well, what happens if they take us down? Friends, I would rather go down fighting for what is right than to put up with what is wrong. I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. And I call upon you to say, no, we are not taking it any longer. And if we will do that, I can assure you, friends, God will honor it and we can turn this thing around. God bless you. Keep fighting the good fight.